Hey, Graham,
Yeah.
are you ready for some wholesome, family friendly roleplay?
Oh, heck yeah.
Hell yeah. Welcome to the Hidden Roleplay Podcast, where we discuss deception and hidden role games. I'm your host, Kyle. Behind the scenes is Alex, and joining me is my co host, Graham. Today's episode is a departure from our game reviews. Instead, we'll be doing a Mafia review. Basically, Graham, Alex, and I partook in a months-long game of Mafia online, having weekly day-night cycles. And today's episode will give the specifics of that 2-month-long game. Later, we're going to be joined by our guest, Bori, who helped moderate that game with our very own Poteet, who designed this particular Mafia. So, Graham, welcome.
Yes. Hello. Thank you. Welcome to you as well.
Would you like to describe the theme of this game and why you chose conflict resolution?
So the theme of the game is, for the most part, rulers of civilization through all spans of time.
Are you a history buff?
No, not really. I do enjoy history, but that doesn't mean that I'm well versed in all avenues of history. But the inspiration of the game or whatnot did kind of come from the history buff in me of I was just jamming Civilization 6 after Civilization 6 game when I was writing this game. And that showed in a lot of the characters that made their appearance.
Okay, so are all the characters from this game taken from that then?
Not all of them, no. But a good majority at some point have been in a Civilization game somewhere between the first and the current installment, which is the 6th.
Did you have a story you wanted to tell, or did you just kind of have this theme that you were like, yeah, we'll see how it plays out?
Initially I kind of was going to do a Inception mash of no time, just here's all the leaders at the same time. It's set enough in the future, enough to where we have technology, but it's not like nuclear fallout far enough, and it's essentially I started with an idea and then I said screw it.
Okay.
The game ends with Benedict Arnold in a car, so
fair.
Yeah.
Now design wise, was this did your inspiration for developing the mechanics of this game come out of some like reform you wanted to make, or just a great idea you had, or were you reacting to something?
When you ask reform or reacting, I'm assuming you're speaking of the meta in which we play these games in. Yeah. Okay. Yes and no. A lot of the, I wouldn't call them extra characters, but a lot of the more on the edge characters I had in the game, obviously, I was 99.9% certain this game was going to day one name claim, which I wasn't expecting a name claim in the first post, but that was a topic for another day. And then the alliance function was just kind of added in there to show players that just because they target someone, it doesn't mean it's bad. Because it feels like in our meta, if someone targets someone overnight, someone sees it, it feels like the next day pitchforks are out ready.
True. Interesting. Well, speaking of that mechanic, I would like to go over the game-specific rules and one might say innovations that you came up with for Mafia 22 conflict resolution. The first was aid. Why did you make role usage require aid?
Not all role usage required aid, but a good bit did. There was a couple different reasons. One, like I said, I figured the game was going to go into name claiming, which usually what comes after name claim, role claiming. And I knew that this game was already with the Alliance is going to kind of, what at least, I guess saying I know is a little presumptuous. I assumed that the game was going to turn into a name claim followed by role claim, and I wanted to give them something to discuss, or maybe I wanted them to weigh the options and decide how to distribute. What I wanted the town to put an open value on their roles during the day.
I see. The part that was most interesting to me about it was from a tribunal member's perspective, you'd have to decide who you think should be allowed to use their abilities. Yeah. So it was one way of saying, I'm putting my money where my mouth is without using your vote, right? Just to say, like, I think these people are on my side. And then that leads directly into the tribunal as a mechanic. So in order to get the aid, someone had to vote on how you were going to distribute it. Tell us about that and why you thought that needed to be included.
Well, the tribunal was a little group. It started as 5 all-town members. And
speaking of, we should mention how many players were in this game.
18, right?
18, yeah.
Yes, okay. So 5 of them started out, all-town members, started out on the tribunal, and we'll get into peace and wartime. That was a separate vote. But also, yes, one of the members on a distributed aid at the end of the phase. And the tribunal was to debate and talk about who they trusted most into giving aid. And I've already forgotten what exactly you wanted to know about it.
I just wanted you to explain it a little bit.
Oh, okay. Well, I did that.
So you started out with 5 members on it, and sometimes the Mafia could infiltrate it, and like it was anonymous, so not everyone knew who else they were working with to distribute this aid. So there was some level of suspicion in that regard. And finally, one way to boost your aid or to try to get aid when maybe you wouldn't be distributed to you was to ally with another player. So why you already talked about this a little bit, but if you have more things to say about allying, this is your time.
Well, directly in regards to allying and aid, I had in my head thought that all vanillas had, compared to some players, a relatively high threshold that they could ask. And I thought if the vanillas, 1, could solidify themselves as town, or 2, get confirmed by a certain role, which we will get to later, that they could essentially become, for lack of better words, like an aid mule later in the game to certain players. Whereas the tribunal could siphon aid to them, the town could ask for alliances or ask certain members that they feel more town that they know have abilities to ally with those aid mules, and thus, without having to give aid to a player that might get night killed, instead they could divide the aid amongst players that they thought were less likely to die, but it would still be used by the better abilities at night.
One thing to playing these games blind, and by that I mean that participants don't know all of what's possible in a given game, was that there was a lot of things people needed to figure out about allying, such as, like, can you see someone you're allied with commit the night kill? And when it was reasonably figured out a couple days in that you couldn't do that, it was like, well, maybe allying is bad. Why are we doing this at all? But the counterpoint to that was that we can dole out aid in a more efficient way if we all ally. So there was an interesting, I wouldn't go as far as to say like a puzzle about it, but there was some nuance to it that you had to figure out through gameplay. And I thought that's a good indicator of a successful mechanic. Finally,
stamp of approval.
Yeah. I'm not all critical, I'm an optimist.
This you are.
The last, I would say, staple of this game would be that there was no cohesive Mafia unit. There was no informed minority. Rather, there was independence, basically. all vying for their own win, no team win. What made you go this direction?
I just wanted to mix it up a little. That's really about it. There was no when I was designing the game in my head, I had come up with the allying and like requesting aid. You're requesting aid from your friends, usually not requesting aid from, in a real world example, enemies in real life aren't usually requesting aid from one another. It happens, but and so when I was thinking, one of the few thematic elements that I did want to keep was it doesn't really make much sense for enemies for leaders and enemies all to be one joint cohesive unit battling against the nations. Now, if it were like a time period, like if I would have made this a strictly World War II game or whatever, I think it's fairly obvious who would have been good and bad. But since this was over a period of time, I mean, it feels like at this point most countries have, I'm putting this in air quotes, good and more quotes, bad leaders to pull from. So it felt like it made more sense making each country and or leader its own entity.
Wow, this just in. Graham thinks the United Nations and GA should be abolished. Yes. Wow.
No.
I would just like to then give you the opportunity to reflect briefly on aid, the Tribune, the alliances, a Mafia of Independence. Did you think these were all successful? Is there one you would have done differently? Would you have scrapped one, or were they all winners? How do you feel in retrospect?
Honestly, I felt pretty good about most of them. Do you want me to touch on War and Peacetime real quick? Okay. One other little mechanic, and it was related to the Tribunal, was each cycle, which was actually a night and day combined instead of the usual like day and then night, was either peacetime or wartime, and different roles could do different things in one or the other times. And then all of the corrupt mafia, whatever you want to call them, bad guys, all won as long as the game was in war. They literally could not win if it was in peace. That being said, mechanically, I was pretty happy with alliances. Honestly, I was expecting a little more, not bartering's not the right word, but I was expecting a little more discussion about it, maybe a little more gamesmanship about trying to get people to ally together. Instead, right from the very first day, this is one of the things that I guess I should have seen coming that honestly I did not see coming, was the very first day of the idea of like, okay, we're just going to find a way to quote unquote randomize this every day. And I don't want to say I was disappointed in that, because if I was in the game, that would have made sense to agree with and do, but that's not how I intended it to do. I wanted it to be more of a trying to barter with who's going to be your ally. Aid, I was pretty happy with. The Tribunal I was extremely happy with. For one, for the way they acted throughout the day. Nobody tried to break the rules, which was fantastic. And then they always submitted everything on time. And I felt like it did give a little bit of maybe Alex can come on later because he was in the Tribunal, but I felt like they were kind of playing a game within a game on most days, which I was happy with. And then the one thing, and this is, we didn't really touch on this, that I really wish in retrospect, I wish I would have changed, is not necessarily given safe claims to the Mafia, but maybe kind of alluded to where they could have gone with the safe claim, something along the lines of like Hitler was a Mafia member, and he could have had something along the lines of as the only German amongst the group or something like that, to where it opened it up like, hey, this country or this time period, pull from there, but I'm not going to tell you who to.
Yeah, I was going to say that myself. You got the jump on me. I do think, yes, I like that I've reiterated this before. I think it's good for the Mafia to have to lie. What I don't want is to the Mafia to be figured out every game because they're all late to claim, right? Because they're like trying to assess who is which names are taken, right?
Right. What's safe? Yeah.
Since we're on the topic, some names. Well, I'll ask you first. Do you have any names in mind that you were like, I wonder if someone will claim that?
A couple that we talked about was like John F. Kennedy, or if you to stay in the American arena, I felt like an FDR or a Teddy Roosevelt. Either of the Roosevelts would have been pretty good. Internationally, I'm not as well versed in international politics, but I know like Boris said at one point, and I thought I totally agreed. Like Princess Diane would have been a really good claim, I think.
Yeah, I think people actually like. I thought of JFK specifically as my backup American claim. I was town, by the way, but I still thought about lying for reasons I'll get into later. But I thought JFK would be a good one because he was assassinated. So Diana makes sense to me for that reason, as like someone who was a target of other potentially corrupt world leaders or people who thought their power needed to be thwarted, right?
Yeah.
Some of the ones that I had written down were, I thought there were two good ones from Russia. Lenin seemed like the most obvious. Like of all the ones that were in the game, Lenin seemed like an obvious one, but Peter the Great too. Given that Genghis Khan was in the game, I thought Attila the Hun would have been a fine one. Sun Tzu, author of, I almost said War and Peace. No, The Art of War.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And Mark Antony, given that Cleopatra was in the game.
Real good. Yeah. See, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying about. I wish I would have put in. We'll get to him. J.D. Koopa's role of as the only Russian here, and then he could have safely gone the route of Lenin. But yeah.
I'll give a couple of my thoughts about it before we move on, of which ones I thought worked and which ones didn't. I thought Aid and the Tribunal were A+. Good job. You did it.
Thank you. Yay.
I really like the Tribunal, like the game within the game aspect and having to decide things for the town at large without letting the town know that you were deciding these things. Because that had like repercussions of responsibility, like I let the town down, and I liked that aspect.
Yeah, I wanted some weight with what they were doing. I didn't want it to just be you have a day chat, blah blah blah. I wanted them to actually contribute to how the game was going, and I feel like it captured that.
Yeah, because it'd be easy to regret if you were on the Tribune, I believe. Like if you gave too much aid to someone and it allowed them to use their Mafia ability, or if you didn't give the seer aid, for example. So those type of things I thought were interesting. Speaking of, I didn't get the aid one of the days, so
I was going to say, you're talking about yourself?
Yeah. But the things I thought could have used some tweaking maybe were the alliances. I didn't feel like they had much of an impact.
I'd agree.
Yeah. And then I think you got a little too close to the sun with the independence as Mafia idea. So my first thought about it, and the reason that I early on day 2 was like, we should just assume this is the scenario, is because it was the original idea I had for Mafia 19, which was the Bride of Raptor Zone, wherein there would only be one independent, and I was wondering, could you catch one independent? And then I decided, well, that's kind of a boring game design, so I inverted it, and instead of it being one independent, it was your team lead. Would you kill your team lead? So you kind of just multiplied that idea by 4 or 5 here, right? So can you catch
the 5
independents, which sounds infinitely more difficult, and I think for good reason. I really think this game could have steamrolled in the wrong direction, especially considering how we killed 3 of them by like before day 4, and somehow the game still was like on the brink of being lost by day 8. And I don't think the town should be in that dire of a situation if they get it right 3 times in 3 days.
Yeah, maybe.
But it kept the tension. So I don't know.
That's
The
right.
way I thought about it was it's like a an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, right? The unstoppable
You got it that
force,
time.
yeah, was that there were 5 independents, and that's a lot in 18 people. And the immovable object was that they had to win in wartime, and town had control of which time it was, supposedly, because that could be whittled down to only the tribunal I'm speaking of could be whittled down to only mafia members. And I feel like the game just could have the like let's say there was only one independent left and there were like 3 tribunal members that were town left and at the end of the game there's no way for that independent to win, so the game would have not been close for that reason. And if 3 independents made it to the last 8 or 9 players, I don't see how the town wins in that scenario either, right? And I feel like the game shouldn't be that out of hand at any given time, but the game didn't go that way, so all of this is a moot point. But the potential that it could have gives me pause.
High variance. Roll the dice.
Well, that's your take. It's your game. Enough of
It
that.
worked out.
Let's get to how the game actually went, instead of hypothesizing about how it could have gone. On day 1, the town got it right and lynched user Master Mukau, who was in actuality not Saddam Hussein. He was Osama bin Laden, and he claimed that he had been Barack Obama, which was also my second choice for who I wanted to claim. I was Abraham Lincoln, but I thought being a beloved American president would make me a target, so I was thinking that maybe I should choose someone a little less conspicuous. So I was thinking
Are you
JFK.
saying Obama's not a beloved American president?
He's not as beloved, I would
No,
say.
not as Lincoln.
No. And he's also sticks out like a sore thumb because of how current he was, which was what got, I would say, made him the target of the day kill almost exclusively, is that it didn't seem to fit in.
Along with the I need to find Osama mechanic, but yeah.
See,
you liked it, I know.
I thought it was fair, and I am one not to try to high roll on day 1 and say I know this person is Mafia. I'm not going to stake my reputation on someone's claim on day 1 of any game. So I was willing to let it play itself out. But given that he was in my top 4 players who had said something suspicious, and that thing being, hey, I was thinking about that fake claim, someone else easily could have thought of that fake claim, I ended up voting for him anyway, which salvages my reputation just a little bit. So what did you think about how day 1 transpired?
I believe when I was talking to Bori about it, I think I said day 1 went exactly how I was expecting. And after rereading, it went almost exactly how I expected. Mass name claim, and then just kind of a lynch around a name. So
I want to say that I anticipated that HeyTrainer would play the way he did, and I really had to choke down. I had to suppress my wanting to say Abby's just trying to prove a point. Abby's just trying to preach. He's trying to preach right now, through his play. But I thought inherently by making that criticism of him, I would sound like I was not town. So I stifled the urge to roll my eyes on the page at him.
Just wait till day 2.
Yeah. Well, speaking of day 2, so overnight, Jellyfisher gets night killed. I think this is probably at least the 3rd time he's been night killed. Yeah, on the first part of the game. Rip to him. Of course, I'm speaking of the same Jellyfisher who came on our podcast earlier this year to talk about their own game.
Last year's Player of the Year. No back-to-backsies.
He wasn't Player
right
of the
now.
Year. He got second.
Oh no, it was Borey. That's right.
Yeah, I kind of like to
Player
think of
of
him
the Year
as
nominee.
he's like honorary Player of the Year. He got like a portion
close.
of this trophy.
It was very close.
In my mind, he has like 15% of the trophy.
15?
He's got like a chunk of it. Well, you can't like give him it would be rude to take more than like a fifth of a trophy away from somebody, right? Because then it'd be like saying you didn't earn it.
You just make another trophy.
I don't know. So the second day, HeyTrainer gets basically railroaded for monopolizing.
For nothing.
Yeah, for monopolizing the conversation. And there are pros and cons to the way he played it. He proved his point, right? So good for him.
Oh, yeah,
but
he definitely proved his point.
But he definitely had to be lynched by the end of this day, I would argue.
No.
Yeah. So what happened was my man's what was he talking so much about anyway? Refresh my memory.
He's just talking. I mean,
right,
it was
so
he's
why
talking
is
about
he
everything.
Bible?
There was no like core tenet that he was really sticking to. It was the fact of people thought he was trying to control the conversation, and that's what he does when he's Mafia. So clearly, he's Mafia.
So you're right in that people thought that he was Mafia for trying to control the conversation, since that's how he's played in the past. But he said the no words. He said the word. He said the words
Cool.
that.
Are we not going to say it either?
I don't remember what they were. I just because I never said them. Blood price. Yeah. So if you said blood price, then this would move you up in the queue for receiving the night kill among the independents. So he said it very carelessly, which was not a small blunder. You have to think that through before you do it. And he started like actually antagonizing people by the end of the day. And then he at a point, let me finish.
Okay.
At a point, he goes on to say that HeyTrainer.
I said, ooh, I thought you were about to pull up some notes on what he said.
He goes on to say that if he flips Vig, and the he in this case is Alabrel, who he's advocating they should kill instead, you caught me red-handed, and I'm lynched day 3. If this had played out in practice, we would have lynched 2 town members, not just 1. And this is a play that Darth Pika actually made recently when he was Mafia, where he says, well, hey, if I'm wrong, then just lynch me the next day. This is never a town thing to say, and yet he somehow comes to the conclusion this is the way to defend himself. As soon as he made that post, I replied that, 1, it's gotten to a point where he's allowed the town conversation to revolve around him by like egging people on to argue with him. So we can't just have this argument every day of is HeyTrainer Mafia or not. And now he has said that we have to kill him if so-and-so flips town, which isn't a good play. And then finally, he makes a post like 20 pages later on the same day, I will say, where he says, this is the kind of enjoyment I only get from these games when I'm Mafia and I'm about to win, which is basically taunting people like, I'm really having a good time. I must because I'm Mafia and I'm about to win. There's no constructive reason to say that. That's inexcusable.
You just want cookie cutter, just facts. You don't want any feelings coming out in the game, do you?
I expressed a lot of feelings about my own impending lynch, and I never at any point said anything where you would point to, like, why did he pretend he was Mafia there for a minute?
I wouldn't constitute that as pretending he was Mafia. Is it the best thing to say no?
How else do you read this? This is the enjoyment I get from these games when I'm Mafia and about to win.
I read it as he's having enjoyment similar to that.
So if you were on his team, you would think that's a perfectly normal thing to say.
I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of context around it.
This is why you got to have a non-mod on the pod to tell you when you're wrong. And
Okay.
you're in a place where you're like, everything HeyTrainer said was great, you guys. A+ HeyTrainer. And I'm here to tell you, he went overboard. He shouldn't have said the no words. He shouldn't have been taunting the other people. And he shouldn't have said that we should kill him if Alabrella's town, because that doesn't do the town any favors. It just sinks the hole farther, objectively, in that play. And that is, well, I'll save that for later.
Okay. Let's move on.
So what I'm saying here is, yeah, it was a bad lynch. But if you're going to spend the entire first 4 days of the of the in real life day phase talking about AT that much, and it looks like it's not going to stop anytime soon, I think that's a fine kill, to be honest. It's not the right kill, as Darth Pika would later say in the game, that we had to. No one's hand was forced. It was not always the right play. It was never the right play.
It
but
sure felt like CRL was a better kill that day.
Yeah, but let's say, so we didn't have anything surefire on CRL either.
She lied.
Right. Well, so did a lot of people. So did Raptor Zone.
More so the bad guys, but yeah. Raptor Zone did lie.
Raptor Zone lied. ProHawk lied. I was open to lying. Lots of town players were willing to lie this game.
ProHawk lied?
Yeah.
About what?
He did not reveal what his ability truly did.
I don't think he truly knows what it did.
Well, I think you're being willfully ignorant about that. But I don't think there was enough evidence to be suspicious.
Hang on. No, ProHawk didn't lie. He just didn't say everything. He said he didn't have a peacetime ability.
He just didn't say everything? Wow, that is the sketchiest thing that has ever come out of your lips.
Technically didn't. He was what's that word? It's not a white lie. What is it when you omit things? There's a phrase I feel like for he's just willful. He was just omitting some things.
That's like when you're in divorce proceedings and you're trying to fight for your estate, and the woman says he cheated on me, and he says, I just didn't tell her all the truths. She never asked me if I was cheating on her.
Okay. Sure.
You gotta bite the bullet on this one, my guy.
I feel like there's a little bit of a difference between what does your ability in an online form game do and a divorce proceeding. But
well, of course, I'm exaggerating. You exaggerate to make it funny.
Well, if my kid comes racing in here and he just had a bag of fruit snacks and he doesn't tell me about the bag of fruit snacks he just had, he's not necessarily lying to me, but he's making sure not to tell me he just had them.
No, okay, so what if your child runs into your room and he says, Daddy, I missed the pot when I went to the bathroom, but he has a trail of poop coming behind him. Do you think that he has given you the right information, or he has left out some key details that he should have shared?
When he was pooping.
Yeah, he did, but he also didn't tell you, Dad, turn around and stop playing your video game. You need to help clean up my poop.
I don't play video games when my kids are awake, for the record, but yeah, I'm sure there's visual evidence in that case, but okay. This has gone way off the rails.
I think you're a sympathist and I'm a realist. I guess that's where we're just gonna leave this conversation.
What can I say? I'm just an optimist.
I don't know about that. So, HeyTrainer's gone from the game, and we follow that up with Al Labrel doing his one good thing and spending his night kill to remove the other of those two Lynch candidates, CRL-88T, from the game, correctly removing Vlad the Impaler from the game. Not much to say about it. It was the right choice. He did what he said he was going to do, and it was the optimal kill. Even in the absence of other, if there had been an absence of other evidence, just to move the day talk forward, it was the right kill. Like,
agree.
Yeah. Following day, I think I might have missed one. Oh, no, there were 2 kills that night. That's why I'm confused. TFS was the night kill. Made a lot of sense because he admitted to being on the Tribune. So why wouldn't he get killed?
That's right.
The following day was interesting in that I was accused of being Mafia based on some faulty information. And it was faulty not in that the information was wrong, but in that the user interpreted it incorrectly. Right?
Sure.
Why don't you describe the situation?
No, go ahead. Go ahead and explain. You were firsthand there.
So, Fear the Pika, who was our other guest on that last Mafia review, he got to copy my wartime ability, but he didn't necessarily get the same name and the same text. He just got the same effect, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And either he overlooked that or he was trying to look down by killing who he thought was a bad player by basically outright accusing me. Do you have some insight on his motivations there?
I don't necessarily know he was trying to get you killed, but I definitely don't think he would have minded getting you killed. I know at the time when he took it, he thought you were Hitler. So yeah, I think he was just looking for some easy town cred, and typically pushing a player like you, even if it doesn't go poorly, or even if it doesn't go well and does go poorly, CAT, pretty much everybody just forgets about it the next day.
I think in a lot of players' minds, the way this day played out was almost exactly the way that the previous day played out, where people were saying, why are you using HeyTrainer's playbook, Renfield? Why are you being so emotional instead of logical, Renfield? Mm-hmm. Is that an accurate assessment in your opinion?
That's very accurate, yes.
Oh, I disagree. I think the proof is that I didn't get killed.
Sure.
Am I wrong? I think this is actually a textbook, like a replay of what HeyTrainer did wrong. And that I didn't act like I was taking pleasure in what was happening to me. I didn't act like I was trying to prove a point. I laid out the facts, and I, point by point, went down the list every time someone responded to me and said, no, this is why you're wrong. Here it is, and here it is. And yeah, I did it in a more brazen way than I usually talk. But I don't think I did it to the level where I was antagonistic about it.
Sure. I mean, it also helped you that there were better Lynch candidates than there were on AT's Lynch Day, besides yourselves.
I disagree. So, there was only one other Lynch candidate on his day, and it was Vlad the Impaler, who had lied, and as HeyTrainer himself pointed out, Lynch all liars.
Oh, you're talking about on AT's Day. Okay.
Yeah. Lynch all liars works more often than it does not. And they were the very last person on the list of claims. So while it wasn't surefire, as I said previously,
it was a great lead.
It was a good lead. And it was only one lead, which is the more important thing about his day compared to my day. Because I was trying to push JD Koopa on my day, and I don't know I don't think there's any one reason there. I would break it down to 3 reasons why AWAS ended up getting killed this day. But
Oh, there's one obvious reason.
I don't think that it was so obvious to kill him instead of me or JD Koopa instead of me. I feel like it was like we had 3 equally, in the eyes of, I would say, everybody, like viable candidates. And so, just by virtue of the odds of being 1 and 3, I would say it was more obvious versus 1 and 2.
I felt like you were 20% of what the town was thinking about, and then the other 2 were both like 40%. Personally,
again, like you're up on your perch, you're looking down with perfect knowledge of what people should and shouldn't do, and yet there are quotes in the game saying consistently, he was seared. We have to see if it checks out. We can't use votes. We have to go by abilities. And that was what had happened to me. Every few pages, you will see those quotes from Darth Pika, from JD Koopa, from Prohawk. And those are the people who are talking the most this day besides myself and Fear the Pika. So I don't think it was as cut and dry as you think it was.
Okay. All right. Well, you live, so it's fine.
I actually think it's pretty interesting how we suddenly changed onto AWAST in like the last 36 hours.
It was the aid.
Then talk about it. It was this 17 aid, yeah, and I want to save that conversation for grades. But
okay.
I still think the aid thing is less evidence than all the evidence I was proposing about JD Koopa.
Ooh, okay.
I was still more sure that JD Koopa was Mafia than I was AWAS was Mafia.
Okay.
I don't know. I just think an arbitrary number like that,
that's right.
It didn't seem like a whole lot.
That's fair. I mean, like I said, I felt like Koopa and AWAS were both substantially better from my perch of knowledge than you. But that's just me.
Now, I still voted AWAS, not just because I was also on the chopping block, but I voted for him and relented on attacking JD Koopa because he was in my bottom 3 players. He was just happened to be second or third to last or second to last instead of last, because he had done nothing to prove he was town. So I had just whittled him down. I had 6 players I thought couldn't be proven town, and 3 of them I was pretty sure, although I was wrong about Superstar. But that was based on a hunch that one of the 2 players you had mentioned in the update would be Mafia. Gotcha. And I mean, it was a fair assessment, I feel like. Anyway, I lost my train of thought. Oh, so other things that made me think he might be Mafia. So
is this Koopa or AWAST?
AWAST.
Okay.
Based on where he claimed, it seemed possible. But then I thought what was more damning, what the reason I was most comfortable voting for him was actually what our boy Raptor Zone pointed out about him. Now, something that I had in his favor for him being town was that he picked a character from a continent no one else did, South America. And he had claimed ability names for peace and wartime that were in Spanish. And I just felt like that was a really nice touch, my guy. That was a really solid claim.
I did like that a lot.
And while nothing could be proven about him, I was like, it doesn't seem terrible, right? But then the sharpest of dinosaurs, Raptor Zone, comes in.
Those teeth.
And he lays out every claimed ability name and points out that these names, when translated to English, don't fit in with these other names because the names are more things that they did and not subtitles, which the Spanish names were. And while I still had a thought when I read this, like, how much Spanish does Graham know? Would he have done his due diligence to to translate things, even if he had conceptualized this. I still thought, well, this is actually puts him like as incriminating as JD Koopa in my mind, having debunked his rolls sound good theory that I had. So I thought it was a good lynch. I will say though that I thought there was quite a bit of evidence against JD Koopa. He had talked about Tanner rolls for no reason, and he had claimed very late, and his claim of a Russian character was way more obscure than like the top 3 ones I would have thought up off the top of my head. So, and he was kind of a yes man. But
in all fairness,
which isn't to say
that last point, he is kind of a agreeable fellow every other game he's played. True. So
you're right. It's kind of an internal bias, I guess. But
yeah,
either points still stand. But at the end of the day, both choices were fine as long as the choice wasn't me. Now, part of my defense in proving that I was Town was that I had to reveal that I could prove who was a free world leader, in this case Town, through my ability. And I'd only cleared one person to that point. What would you have classified as like the seer roles in this game?
You, Rax, maybe Osama. That's about it.
Yeah, we should say that Rax's role could like pick 3 people to take along on either a vigilante shot or subsequently a roadblock. And if 2 of those 3 people were bad guys, they would be notified, right? And there would be consequences, but you would have to get it really right for that to do anything.
Correct.
I don't know about the balance of this, that you didn't have a true seer role in a game where we had to pick 5 people out of a lineup of 18 people.
I gave you 5 free hits on your seer roll for Town. You just died.
What do you mean?
All your abilities would have cleared each vanilla free world leader.
But I had to use them to get.
That's what I'm saying. Those. Yeah. If you
and we had to figure it out. We had to. There also could have been like a point where I would have used my roll but not seen my kill coming and never gotten the chance to explain it, and the Town wouldn't have discussed it because they never discuss what happens to dead people, unfortunately. Right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Maybe they would at that time.
But I get killed. The following day, Fear the Pika does see it through and copies JD Koopa's alignment, but claims that he has seared him, which spells disaster for JD Koopa. He ends up getting lynched the following day. Then Raptor Zone gets killed the following night. Anything you want to say about either of those 2?
No, not really, because to be honest, after your domino falls, I felt like the night kill was pretty obvious every night going forward.
Yeah. The Johnny Bones kill on day 5, I actually did think was not a great choice. I don't want to talk about every day phase, obviously, but this one I thought was bad, not because they didn't get a Town member, or they didn't get a Mafia member, but because of the Town member they chose to remove. Do you remember the rationale for why they killed Johnny Bones?
Without looking, honestly, no.
I read the thread today and I still don't understand.
I think it had something to do with just he's an unknown, and that's about it.
I think some people just didn't like the way he was posting.
Yeah, this new guy's rubbing us the wrong way, kind of thing.
He received 4 votes, and Darth Pika received 4 votes. And while they're both town, and obviously not optimal to kill either one of them, I think it was really wrong to kill Johnny Bones instead of Darth Pika, because Darth Pika, for the simple reason he was last on the list of people remaining, and killing him.
The Matty Stacks list?
Yeah, the list of claims.
Matty Stacks.
Like when in doubt, if you had clearly they didn't have a good consensus because it was 4-4. So what they should have done was gone with what was the best indicator of who could be Mafia at that point. And they would have had much easier discussions in the ensuing days if the list going up from the bottom was smaller and smaller.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. There was no night kill the following night, and that was because the only remaining independent then was Fear the Pika, having copied JD Koopa's Mafia win condition. And a limitation you put on his role, given that he had started the game without a win condition, was that since he had such good rolls over the course of the game, and that led to him having a lot of, hypothetically, and that's how it played out practically, he would have had a lot of town cred. His limitation then for being Mafia at that point was he could only have every other night kills, which I thought was balanced.
Correct. And he would have never been viable to get the kill if there were corrupt world leaders around. He did not gain the tiebreaker clause.
So there's no night kill the following night. Weiss on Ice is the following day kill. What would you like to share about that event?
It feels like a carbon copy of the Johnny Bones Darth Pika day. I did not like the Weiss kill.
Yeah. The way, so I didn't see the tribunal chat during the game. I didn't see it till the end. And what I understood was going on was that Fear the Pika was trying to look like, he was trying to impersonate Weiss on Ice, and that was what ended up getting him killed. Because he voted for wartime and said that he was basically Weiss on Ice.
This is what Weiss on Ice wants, right? Yeah.
So I read the thread today, and if that was him impersonating Weiss on Ice, that doesn't. No,
it doesn't look like it at all. No,
it was basically him just saying, "Hey, I'm Weiss. Let's vote wartime."
Yeah. Oh, I thought Weiss was a good guy. Oh no.
This didn't signal red flags to the two people who were in there that, like, why would you say this about yourself?
Right.
Like this is like committing suicide in the game if you're actually trying to win the game. It made more sense to me at the time why they were killing Weiss, but this one's like really on Superstar and Rax's shoulders, and of course Rax is the one who makes the push at the end there, but just by virtue of knowing what he knew, like Superstar, I think also is kind of at fault for not putting voicing some reason here.
This is the game within the game.
And now I'm outside the game at this point, and I'm able to have perfect knowledge. And I do think that the players who were removed from the game were overly critical of the decisions that were being made. I don't think it was obvious at this point in the game that Fear the Pika was Mafia. There were indications, such as him being the second to last person left on the claiming list. The fact that he, mad no one ever brought this up, he refused to answer what kind of abilities he had that could identify alignments, whether they were war or peacetime. He always skirted the subject. There was him claiming an obscure pope, right? And he also had poorly explained his acquiring of my ability, and why would the Pope need to acquire a wartime ability. It doesn't thematically make as much sense. Though there were
Right.
things that pointed to him maybe being not proven town, but I don't think it was obvious that he was as Mafia as people who are moving the game seem to think. But I don't think that absolves the choice of getting rid of Weiss on Ice, because it just seemed so clearly that he was being framed.
Yes, it seemed very obvious.
That one looks bad in retrospect. Rax is the
That's
night
honestly
kill.
probably the worst one in retrospect.
Yeah. Rax is the night kill, and this is again simply because they were on the tribunal, but also I think because they had kind of proven what they could do, and I don't think anyone really thought they were Mafia at this point. The final day comes down to 6 players. Obviously, Fear the Pika, the remaining other member of the tribunal, Superstar, as well as Prohawk, Maddie, Stax, Atarian, and Darth Pika. And it is not a lynch or lose situation because the game will not go to wartime. So even though the game has to be in wartime with 5 players left, and there will be 5 players left after this day, assuming someone gets lynched, they cannot achieve a win con because they need it to be in wartime. What did you think going into this day? Did you think Fear the Pika would get lynched, or did you think he would make it out?
I thought it was his day, to get lynched. And it appeared it was going to bore out that way, too.
I had no confidence in them to lynch him. And I had called it like a couple days or like a couple weeks earlier that he was going to make it to a lynch or lose scenario. So I thought he wasn't possibly get lynched until day 8. But actually, I was wrong. And some very clever sleuthing by Superstar, I think, put the nail in Fear the Pika's coffin.
Making up for the Weiss on Ice.
Yeah, so there were some bad reads by Superstar in this game, but this one I think makes up for it.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about it.
The thing that sticks out the most to me is he went through the tribunal chat and the way that individual is posting, and he found Fear the Pika abbreviating himself capital F, lowercase t, uppercase P. And he couldn't find anybody else in the game that did that besides Fear the Pika.
I would have got him.
So that seems pretty damning.
Yeah, that was hype. That was like some Sherlock Holmes shit.
I was like, because honestly, he had to have looked through every FTP post in the game that contained that, because I'm pretty certain if you search just FTP on the site, it's just going to pull up FTP in every sort of capitalization pattern. So he took the time to go through every single one, and good for him.
Yeah. On that note, the day did not end in his lynch. Do you want to talk about how it did end?
Sure. So as you said, Fear the Pika couldn't win, and let's just get comfortable so we can break this down. There we go. All right, how you doing, Kyle? Fear the Pika couldn't win, and it appeared he was going to die that day anyway. Would you agree with that?
At that point, I think he was favored to lose, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And we're going to rewind all the way back to day 0. I put the rules up for this game, and as we said, there were some, I don't know if calling them new is necessarily fair for all of them, but unique mechanics that aren't standard to the games on the website. The alliances, the wartime, the aid, all that. And so when I posted the game, I posted just those, because I didn't want it being cluttered with the usual rules that are in every game. I wanted it because I asked. There's no way anybody actually takes the time and reads that first post for the rules every time.
You better read it for my game.
I'm going to now, but I know you don't for every game. Don't lie to me. There's no way.
I do. No way you read. I don't read it entirely, but I look to make sure that all of that nothing's been deleted or removed.
Okay.
If all the same like letters are still there, then I don't read them. But I do check to see if anything was deleted or added.
Okay, fair.
So I knew going in that things had changed, and I didn't stop to think about it again until this happened.
This day, yeah. So what I intended was to go back and put your typical boring rules in when I updated the game on day one. I forgot to. Spoiler alert. So there was no rule, which is a common rule on the site of no quoting your no quoting your role as it's sent to you via PM, or quoting any PM from the moderator, for matter of fact. And so the day turns into essentially FTP versus Superstar as the Lynch candidate. And like we said, it appeared that FTP was trending towards being the Lynch anyway. I think it's fair to say that FTP was definitely antagonizing Star a little bit, kind of poking at him, trying to poke the bear and see how mad he could get him. And I think Superstar got a little irritated with that, a little agitated, and he started to lash out. And it started with, actually, before the roll, I'd have to go back and look, but there was pretty much, I think, a direct quote from the tribunal. And I just kind of let it go. I was like, okay, this is weird, but it's technically not against the rules because, and I didn't even think of going back and saying, oh no, the rules aren't even in the rules. But I was like, technically, the tribunal weren't supposed to reveal themselves, but they could discuss anything. Let's talk about it in the tribunal. I didn't really have a problem with that post. But then he posts his roll. And in all fairness, it was edited very, very slightly. We're talking like words like "and" removed. And in the past games, this is usually a cause for a mod kill. And you just remove the player from the game and voila. The problem, though, is when you're mod killing someone is, more often than not, correct me if I'm wrong, you are verifying that what they did was against the rules. And the reason it's against the rules is because they did what you weren't supposed to. And in this instance, it would be quote your role. So I am confirming his role if I mod kill him, which seals the door more on FTP. So I had some options, and I wasn't super thrilled with any of them. I could let it go. We'll get back to that. Actually, let's just get to it now. We could let it go. And when I looked at what was going on in the game, it felt like if I wanted to keep the playing field perfectly level, honestly, letting it go would have probably been the best for the game. Well, 100% would have been best for the game state. And in all fairness, him sharing his role, because everybody already knew for the most part what he did as the character. But I didn't want to set the precedent of this happening again to someone else, or just, God forbid, myself. So I knew I had to remove him from the game. So that took me to three options, which were the typical just mod kill him in the middle of the day phase and just let the play run out. Mod kill him, end the day, and proceed in the night phase. Or mod kill and then redact his role, and then again either continue the day phase or end it. And in all those instances, FTP never wins. And in all those instances, I'm confirming what Superstar does, and I'm giving the town this day and the next still to catch FTP. It felt like it was a done deal, so the game ended.
Right. I think it was the right choice. It's unfortunate. It's like unfortunate from the player's perspective because they don't feel like they got to seal a deal. It's unfortunate for the victims in these circumstances, if you want to call him that, Superstar, because he did something that he didn't want to be the bad guy and ruin a game for the Pika, because you don't want to lose like that, and also for yourself, because you put a lot of time and effort into crafting a game and you want to see it come to a full conclusion and not limp to a conclusion. But it happens. I've actually been thinking this would happen sooner than now. It's been in the back of my mind for a little bit of, well, it isn't the first time anyone's brought up, like, well, if you're telling the truth, mod kill yourself. And
it actually had been brought up earlier in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want at any point this to be a viable strategy. I actually think there needs to be a harsher punishment than being mod killed for breaking the rules that hard. In the future, anyway, not necessarily now.
I was gonna say it wasn't even in my rules. That's completely off the table to me.
But now that we've had the discussion,
I don't.
I actually think the punishment needs to be if you purposefully, to win the game or to advance the game, mod kill yourself. You should be banned either from all of that moderator's future games, or all games in general.
I'd have to honestly. I haven't thought about it at all. I don't know without taking your route how you would get harsher than just mod killing them. So either super short leash or
The other things you could do are, if you mod kill yourself, then your team loses, and then that doesn't get you banned from more games, but that's not fair to everyone else.
Right.
Especially if you're like rage quitting, you're like, I don't care. I just want everyone else to have a bad time too. So, yeah. But then that punishment doesn't work if you don't host another game, right? So then it would be on someone else to pick up the punishment for you.
Right.
So,
yeah.
There's more debate to be had about that, but I mean, that's how I will be handling it. If someone attempts to influence the game by mod killing themselves, then I won't have them as a player again. And maybe what I'll do for games where I'm not hosting is I won't play in a game with that person either.
Right. I mean, we saw it. Like I said, it wasn't in the rules, and I don't think anybody took it as a super ill-intentioned play necessarily. So, learn just a learning thing and move on.
I think we're done then with the conclusion of the game and ready to move on to our moderator grades, everyone's favorite segment, unless there's more specifics about the game that you wanted to cover.
I don't have anything extra right now, no.
Hey, this is Alex. We ran long in part 2 in our grade segment, so we are going to split this into 2 podcasts. We will run that one next week. We'll have all the grades with our special guest, Bori, and then we will give out some nominations for the Scummy Awards. So we will see you next week.